In recent months, a couple people who see me for spiritual direction asked the same kind of question. They were wondering what I thought about the use of hallucinogens, peyote and ayahuasca, for spiritual enlightenment. Maybe you are not aware of this, but the use of peyote and ayahuasca have become more popular on retreats and different kinds of spiritual explorations and are being marketed as special kinds of spiritual experiences. These are substances, hallucinogenic substances, that grew up within indigenous cultures. So I want to talk about the use of hallucinogens, and particularly peyote and ayahuasca today. As I do, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel as well as to click the bell so you're notified of future videos. I understand that this whole topic may be something very new and very different for you. But I think it's an important one because I see it that it keeps coming up in a variety of places. Within indigenous cultures in the American Southwest and Central America, some cultures, not all, some cultures have traditionally included the use of peyote and ayahuasca as a form of ritual for enlightenment, for insight, for spiritual opening and growth. Some would consider it much like a sacrament. And it's happened in recent years and recent decades that individuals have gone, who are not from the cultures, have gone on experiences, sometimes weekend retreats, sometimes week-long retreats, where the highlight is the opportunity to use one of these hallucinogenic substances. For instance, I've heard several interviews with actor Will Smith talking about his experiences with ayahuasca. The use of hallucinogens isn't new. Not only is it part of Native American or some indigenous cultures, but it was popular in an earlier time in North American culture. For instance, in the 1960s, Timothy Leary used the phrase turn on, tune in, drop out to talk about the use of acid and other hallucinogens, LSD, for spiritual enlightenment, the expansion of consciousness, things like that. In the same time period, in the 1960s, Carlos Castaneda wrote about indigenous shamanism and the use of hallucinogens. And these were very popular books and still are. So there is some history, there is some popular appeal out there. But I do have some concerns about the use of peyote and ayahuasca. And they have to do with some very specific aspects that are not about the hallucinogens themselves. My first concern is that Euro-American people are going to these practices for spiritual fulfillment. And my concern is that Euro-American culture has a long history of colonization. For hundreds of years, Euro-American people have taken from indigenous people their land, their people, sold their people into slavery, adopted music and art and artifacts as their own, and taken so much of the spiritual heritage that I look at some of what's happening today and I think, is this the same thing? Is this cultural appropriation? Is this an extension of the history of colonization? In the 90s and early 2000s, I spent a significant amount of time with Native American elders, healers, medicine people. And one of the things I consistently heard from them was their concern that white people, Euro-American people, were taking their culture and continuing this colonization, that they were appropriating things and using them without context and with disrespect. And out of that, I learned to be very respectful and very careful anytime I was invited into a ceremony. And I was invited to participate in things like sweat lodges and healing rituals and ceremonies, as well as something significant that few outsiders are invited to, an Apache changing woman ceremony. And what I learned was how important it was for me to understand the context of whatever the ceremony was, how it fit into the culture. I had to do my homework. And I had to learn in that context what it meant for me to be a respectful outsider, because I was not part of the culture. I was not part of the community. And so I learned the importance of that respect. And I see that there are people from these cultures who are marketing the experiences with peyote and ayahuasca, as well as other things. And I recognize that that is also part of colonialization. That often with marginalized people, there will be a few who will sell off whatever they can from the culture because it's sellable. But at the same time, they are giving away their culture. And it's offensive to the leaders in that culture. So it's a very complex dynamic. And I often think that, particularly with the use of peyote and ayahuasca, that these colonialistic dynamics and cultural appropriation are occurring over and over again. My second concern is about the folks and their spiritual journey who are seeking out these experiences. Do they have a regular spiritual practice to begin with? I mean, people whose culture include the use of hallucinogens, that's not their starting point. Instead, it comes after real preparation, after years of learning the culture, the sacred stories, engaging in spiritual practices. I mean, indigenous people do much the same things that I do. They're slightly different practices, they call them different things, but they know their sacred stories. They know what the spiritual practices are, and they engage in them. And they eventually include the use of these hallucinogenic substances. But for those who are showing up for a retreat, is it just that they want a momentary high and something out of context? Are they really looking at the spiritual dimension of their life and what it means to nurture that, what it means to really grow in that area? So ultimately, my concerns about the use of hallucinogens have a lot to do with ethics and morality and cultural appropriation. In the end, whatever the practice is, if it's not from your culture or if it's something you're learning new, it needs to be treated with a great deal of respect, because it just didn't come out of nowhere. All spiritual practices have grown up over thousands of years and have been handed down to us by people who really worked at them and refined them and found what is beneficial for our growth and our development. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, like the video, share it with others, leave me some comments and questions, and know that I appreciate the time you spend with spirituality beyond borders. Have a great day.